You already know why they feared him. But fear was never the full story. Because when a powerful voice goes quiet, the world doesn't go silent. It starts listening differently. This is What Came After Farrakhan. For more than 60 years, Minister Louis Farrakhan stood on stages across America telling people to rise, to think, to build. He spoke about family, pride, and responsibility. He told men to protect, women to lead with strength, and children to believe they could be more than what the system allowed. Some called it inspiration. Others called it dangerous. But no one could ignore it. Today, his voice is rare. The sermon stopped, the crowd smaller, the cameras mostly gone. Yet somehow, he's still everywhere. Clips of his old speeches float across the internet. 15 seconds here, a single quote there, shared by people who don't even know where the words came from. He may have left the stage, but the echo never left the world. That's the strange thing about ideas. They don't die, they travel. Farrakhan's words once moved through radios and cassette tapes. Now, they move through algorithms and playlists. You can hear his influence in hip-hop, in community programs, even in podcasts about self-discipline and ownership. The rhythm changed, but the message stayed. In his prime, Farrakhan filled arenas like rock concerts. He wore sharp suits, spoke without notes, and could hold a crowd with just a pause. To his followers, he was a reminder that faith could be power. To his critics, he was a warning. Proof that a confident black leader could still make America nervous. TV hosts debated him. Politicians avoided him. Celebrities quoted him one day and denied him the next. He was both praised and punished, sometimes in the same week. After the Million Man March in 1995, his image reached its peak. Hundreds of thousands of men stood on the National Mall. No fights, no fires, just peace and prayer. Even President Clinton had to admit it was historic. But the same event that inspired millions also scared others. Reporters used words like intimidating and unsettling. They couldn't explain why a peaceful crowd looked like a threat. Maybe because unity itself can look like power, and that was always the pattern. When Farrakhan talked about building your own businesses or protecting your own community, supporters heard freedom. Critics heard separation. When he told people to rely on themselves instead of the system, some called it wisdom, others called it hate. The same sentence could be a warning or a promise, depending on who was listening. By the 2000s, his presence started to fade from mainstream media. Networks stopped inviting him. Articles used words like controversial instead of leader. But outside the headlines, his message kept finding new life. Rappers turned his quotes into lyrics. Community groups used his speeches and workshops about family and manhood. Young people started hearing him online, not from the pulpit, but from remixed videos shared on social media. And that changed everything. You can try to ban a man, but you can't ban curiosity. In 2019, major platforms removed his accounts. They called it policy. But deleting him only made more people ask who he was and why he mattered. Clips started reappearing everywhere, on TikTok, in YouTube compilations, in reaction videos from people who weren't even born when he first spoke. A voice that was supposed to disappear found a new audience. Some saw a prophet, others saw a problem, but everyone kept watching. That's what came after Farrakhan, a digital rebirth. His influence slipped into culture like a melody you can't place but recognize instantly. Public Enemy, Ice Cube, Jay Electronica, all echoed parts of his message. Even Kanye West once called him a teacher. Through music and interviews, the same themes reappeared: self-reliance, pride, and a refusal to wait for validation. It wasn't about religion anymore. It was about self-belief. Yet the fear stayed. Media outlets still flinched at his name, not always because of what he said, but because of what he represented. Control without permission. A community thinking for itself. A leader the system didn't create. That has always been America's soft spot. The same independence that built the country also threatens the people who run it. In interviews, Farrakhan could be calm one moment and fierce the next. He could praise peace, then challenge power in the same breath. To supporters, that honesty was strength. To critics, it was chaos. Even now, that divide remains. Search his name online and you'll find two worlds. One filled with gratitude, another filled with fear. Maybe both are true. As the years went on, he spoke less about confrontation and more about reflection. He talked about legacy, about preparing the next generation to think critically, to build families that last. He warned that fame without discipline would destroy people faster than poverty. And while those final speeches didn't make headlines, they found new life in classrooms and online debates about culture and morality. Sometimes, the quieter words last the longest. So what really came after Farrakhan? A generation trying to decide what to keep and what to leave behind. Some took his message as a call to independence. Others used it to justify isolation. But everyone who listened had to confront the same question. How much truth can a nation handle when it comes from a man it tried to erase? Look around today and you'll still feel his influence. Not in temples or rallies, but in the way people talk about self-respect, image, and worth. When an artist says, "We don't wait for permission," that's his echo. When a podcast host tells young men to be responsible fathers, that's his echo. When a teacher reminds students that pride isn't arrogance, it's armor, that's his echo too. He may not trend every week, but the language of strength he helps shape is everywhere. It's in business seminars, in motivational quotes, in TikTok captions about focus and purpose. People repeat his ideas without realizing where they came from. That's the mark of lasting influence. When the message no longer needs a name, still, the contradictions remain. He inspired faith and fear, respect and resistance. He was a mirror that made the country uncomfortable, and mirrors rarely get thanked. Some remember him as a teacher, others as a warning. History will keep arguing over which version is true, but both versions built the same result: awareness. After him, the Nation of Islam continued, smaller but steady. Younger leaders took the stage, trying to modernize the discipline he preached. Some succeeded, others faded. But beyond religion, his blueprint of ownership and organization lived on. It became part of how many black communities built economic power, long after the microphones were gone. In recent years, artists, scholars, and even critics have begun to look back at his speeches with new eyes. Not to agree, but to understand the time, the fear, the context, because every generation rediscovers old voices differently, and maybe that's what keeps them alive. It's strange. We measure influence by followers and likes now, but Farrakhan built his reach without hashtags, without sponsorships, without algorithms. Just a voice, a message, and conviction. In a time when everyone speaks but few listen, that kind of focus feels almost impossible. He once said America lived with two faces, the dream and the denial. Maybe that's why his legacy still matters, because he forced people to look at both. And long after his speeches ended, the same question he posed still hangs in the air. Can a nation preach freedom abroad while fearing it at home? That's what came after Farrakhan, a long echo, a reminder that the fight for dignity never ends with one person. That voices fade, but ideas keep walking. That controversy ages faster than conviction. And that influence, the real kind, doesn't always look like fame. Sometimes it looks like reflection. He's 90 now. His steps slower. His speech is rare. But whenever someone talks about pride, unity, or building without hate, his fingerprints are there. He doesn't have to speak anymore. The culture does it for him. So maybe the real question isn't whether Farrakhan's story is over. Maybe it's whether we're ready to hear what came after and to decide what we'll do with the echo.